Hi, and welcome back to FEN Guide. We're into our second monthly issue and still working to bring you all the things you need to know to enjoy listening to Tokyo's only English language station. Today, we've got an interview with Van Halen's lead singer, David Lee Roth, which takes us from the jungles of New Guinea to the sunny beaches of California. And following along that theme, we pick up Side B with a clip and interview of the West Coast disc jockey G.W. McCoy on KIQQ. To wrap it up on a more serious note, we bring you a selection of news stories from FEN News. And now, let's take a look at life on the wild side with David Lee Roth.
Now tell me, I notice here your leg is either in a cast. Is that in a cast right now?
Well, I went out on an expedition through the highland jungles of New Guinea. We were the first people to cross over the Star Mountains. We went over the Strickland Gorge Divide, and nobody has ever done that before, ever. And it took us about 33 days in the jungle, out of contact from people and whatnot. And I hurt myself towards the last week, and we spent the last week hiking on it, so I just had to go to the hospital for a little bit. No problem.
What happened?
Well, it's a place where there aren't even any trails. Most of where we went isn't even on the map. And we spent most of the time hiking through rivers in the water, and something got inside my boot, and I stepped on it, and I got a little cut, and it turned into the alien.
Oh, no. But it's going to be all right then, I guess.
Yeah, no problem.
What prompted you to go to New Guinea? That's a really wild area.
Well, it's the kind of place where you're on your own. You're supposed to depend on your own hands and your own wits, as opposed to being catered to, whatever that is, whether it's opening the limousine door or adjusting the microphone in the studio. People become very dependent on technology. People become very dependent on other people doing everything for them in this business, and going to some place like New Guinea is a chance to test yourself when you're on your own.
Yeah, I would just guess, especially you're with a band, Van Halen, which is one of the biggest in the world, if not the biggest rock and roll band in the world.
Well, there's only four of us, but we're very popular.
Yeah, but yeah, right. But what I'm saying is that I would guess just because you are so popular, and you could be catered to almost all the time and maybe never see the outside world for what it really is. So,
well, I try and see different parts of the world. I spend most of my off time traveling. You know, a lot of the guys that come back and they spend their time at home or going on more reasonable vacations. And I like to go out into parts of the world where perhaps nobody's ever seen it before.
What do you think about rock and roll being popular in places like Japan or the Far East? I mean, why do you think it's so popular?
Well, rock and roll is an attitude. Rock and roll is a way of getting up in the morning and going to bed at night. In fact, some of you may not even go to bed at night, and that's rock and roll too.
That's great. Now, you guys have reputations for being big partiers, you know, getting wild, getting crazy. Is that pretty much true?
Well, the only reason we have that reputation and most other bands don't is because we invite the press in, and the rest of the bands keep the press out.
Yeah, that's true. So you just open it up and let people see what's happening then.
Well, I didn't get this job to hide out.
Is it still fun for you?
Oh, absolutely. It's more fun than it ever was.
I guess it would be. Yeah, I guess it would be better than working in a three-piece suit in some office somewhere.
Well, there's a time and a place for the three-piece suit, but it's genuinely not in the office for Van Halen.
Mm-hmm. How many live gigs have you guys played since you first started?
Geez, I couldn't tell you. I think we've logged over 400,000 miles just in the United States alone in the last 7 years. And that's just on land. That doesn't include in the airplanes or whatever mode of travel we take. It's a constant thing. It's not year by year. We started out, it depends on how much you want to play. Van Halen loves to play. So we go out on the road for longer periods of time. But we break it up. We don't stay on the road for a year, just period for a year. We break it up here and there. We'll take a week off here, a week off there. It is more of a world vacation.
Yeah, so you just try to make sure you stay in contact with people at home. I know a lot of bands get a little bit upset because they travel so much and then they just get tired of the travel and all the concerts. And I would guess that might take away from their energy, too.
Well, it's so lonely up there in that Learjet, man. And it's so lonely out on your own private yacht. And it's so lonely up in the special box in the back of the movie theater. That's what people want you to believe. That's a good way of keeping you in your place if you're not a rock star.
Now, you guys come from Pasadena, all of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
and that's where you grew up. I lived in Pasadena myself for about 5 or 6 years. Do you keep your roots there? I mean, do you have a lot of your friends that you had before you guys got together and performed? I mean, those the people you like to hang out with when you're back in town?
I don't have very many friends who are musicians. I certainly don't have very many who are in other bands or even in the entertainment industry. A lot of the entertainment industry is based purely on the mirror. Me, 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 and when they point in the mirror, it's you, which means me all over again, you know. Most people in the music business, they spend 10 years working out a show on a little stamp stage in a bar somewhere, and then they take that out. You can't expect them to articulate beyond what it is they're playing, and most of them aren't even playing anything but E and bar chords. So it's, you know, what can you talk about there? It's like you're trying to discuss the newspaper with somebody up in New Guinea. The only thing they use the newspaper there is for rolling their cigarettes. You know.
Oh, well, that's cool.
Though they say the Post-Courier is the most smoked newspaper in the Western world.
Is that right? Oh, God. So what do you think of some of the other rock and roll acts that are out today?
Well, I like the band Rat. I like their new records and stuff. But I understand that their new album is going to be delayed. They were at the studio here in Los Angeles not long ago, and the lead singer locked his keys in the car in the parking lot in the studio. It took him 2.5 weeks to get the rest of the band out.
Cool. What about now? Let's turn to a different.
Motley Crue's stuck in traffic. They won't be here today.
Yeah, well, I think you guys are the best and most innovative for sure of all the rock acts. But what about some of the new wave bands? Like, what do you think of Culture Club?
Well, if Boy George is truly waking up with the house on fire, you can bet David Lee set the blaze.
What about Duran Duran?
Duran Duran, translated into an English axiom, is Smith Smith, which is the most plain name that you can possibly have. It would be like calling your band Jones Jones or whatever. And in fact, I think they're supposed to spell it with a T, D-U-R-A-N-T. But that goes back to education and what you spend your life doing. And I guess they got their band together. They make great music. And trying to think of an anecdote I could tell you about them. I remember seeing them backstage at a Paris TV show about 3 years ago, and the lead singer telling me, "Are you guys?"
Simon Le Bon.
Yeah, he says, "Fine, aren't you Van Halen?" "Yes, we are." He says, "Oh man, if I don't get your autograph for my little brother, he plays nothing but Van Halen records."
Really, this is in England, right?
Yeah, and this is in the new wave. So I thought, oh man, if you ever told the press that, it'd be curtains. And in fact, they talk about the new wave and the bold new strokes that people are making in music, and I'm all for it. Except if you look on the back of Frankie Goes to Hollywood's new one, it says special thanks to Van Halen.
Does it really? Welcome to
Van Halen has single-handedly changed the face of music and culture as we know it, and I'm glad you asked
Yes,
why.
I know. I'm glad I asked about that. Can you explain how you have
Well, what it
changed
is that with Van Halen, see, we have hosted a whole group of imitators, people who mimic the band, who try and play lickety-split like Edward, who grow their hair like mine. And then, even more importantly, on the other hand, we have a whole horde of musicians and bands who can't stand Van Halen. They can't stand our kind of music or the way that I do interviews. And they're forced to come up with some very substantial alternative music, man. And that's how come you have New Wave.
Okay. Well, I could ask you about a few more new wave acts, but I kind of get the idea of where you're coming from. How about funk music? What do you think of, let's say, Grandmaster Flash? Or
he's hip, he's cool, he's solid gold. They call him, the kids Grandmaster, cook faster than any known, stone to the bone, full grown. He's a one of a kind, and Flash is gonna rock your mind. Huh! I've been listening to that stuff before they could spell scratch, man. I listened to it in the day when it meant nothing but your shoes and haircuts. Now everybody's listening to it because it's the best dance music. It's the best it's the best stuff for after dark.
What about your music and dancing? Do you feel people should dance to your music, or is it, why don't you give your feelings on that?
Well, Van Halen music, it's different from song to song. You can't categorize it all as dance music. Some of it is great dance music. Some of it is more vibrate music. It's more up and down than lateral movement. And some of it is just listen on the Walkman music.
Mm-hmm. When you're writing the music, do you think of any particular kind of audience, or is it just your own creativity?
Lately, I've been thinking of Mr. T.
Really? I like Mr. T, too. I really do.
It's a visualization technique. I felt that it would give them the song more hormones. We'll have to see when we put it on sale.
Is he your hero? Is he one of your?
Well, he's one
idols?
of my heroes.
Yeah, he's mine too. I always talk about him on K-Rock all the time. They're kidding me about him. I got
Well,
him.
for a while, I answered all my interview questions like Mr. T does, like that. They say, "Well, Dave, what do you think of all the competition? The bands that are coming up and are just starting to be popular. What do you think of the competition?" I tell them, "I pity the man who tries to take what's mine."
Want to hear my imitation? You get mad at me and I'll take care of you, sucker.
That's it. What do you envision for the future, Dave? Pain.
And what do you see as the future right now for you and Van Halen? Are you guys going to go on for a while longer? Obviously, for a while longer. But how much longer do you want to stay in rock music? You plan to make it as long as the Stones have been doing it, or?
Van Halen, barring any acts of God or Ferrari, will continue on for quite a while. We're better now songwriters than ever before. And we all have our own solo projects. We all have our own private interests, whatever they may be, musical or otherwise. And that's the glue that makes our arguments so refreshing when we finally get back in the studio.
What about you, David Lee Roth? Aside from being with Van Halen, what do you like to do in your personal life? What kind of hobbies do you like? What do you do to kick back?
Oh, I just finished a 4-song EP called Crazy from the Heat, and I did that with my pal Edgar Winter. We did that in New York over a period of 5 days. And we picked up some old big band music and some not so old rock tunes, and we put them together, and that's coming out around the new year internationally.
What do you like to do for fun, though, when you're away from the music scene?
I travel. I spend my time outdoors more often than not, either by the ocean or up in the mountains somewhere. I'm not a hippie, but I get my fair share of noise and bright lights and the loudness, which is half of what I'm about. I get that right here in Hollywood.
Cool. So, anyway, aside from that, are you married or are you single?
No, I'm not. Single. On my own.
Are you totally single now, or do you have a special woman?
I took a girl with me to New Guinea. We trained for that for 3.5 months. And oddly enough, she's a girl who does the Army commercials on television. And
really?
Like a little happy, all that you can be with David Lee.
That gives you kind of a conservative to the liberal, It's like a Jekyll and Hyde there.
You got to balance the strain, man. This is the new year, babe, and you've got to decide. Got to make your resolution at the beginning, the kickoff of the year. You have to decide. This is a dog-eat-dog world, right? You got to decide whether you're going to be a hot dog or a little wiener.
So you need the Army behind you, right?
Well, I have decided to remain a little wiener at least for one more season.
So do you envision yourself down the road in the near future, let's say getting married, having a family?
I've never had a specific goal, but I've always had a vision, and I have an idea of which way to head, but I'm not sure exactly where we're going. There's the old joke that says, man, I got some good news and some bad news. First, the bad news, we're lost. And the good news is we're making great time.
So do you ever see yourself in, do you ever have, I guess, fantasies, or maybe you're like a Walter Mitty when you see yourself in another profession? If you weren't in rock music, what would you see David Lee Roth doing?
Oh, I have no idea. It would be something in the entertainment field. I've always been trying to attract attention. What is in Tom Sawyer when he dances down the white picket fence for Becky Thatcher. I've been dancing down the fence for the world of Becky since I can possibly remember. I started singing and learning words to songs when I was 7 years old. I learned everything that Al Jolson has ever done. California, here I come. And to this day, I still wear white gloves and keep a greatest hits collection in the suitcase.
So Al Jolson has been one of the inspirations to your music with Van Halen, then?
Yes, he was.
Any others?
Oh, number of people. I can't name any single band who I entirely love. I can name one band and say, oh, great haircut. You name another band and say, good rip-off of reggae. Oh, yes. And you can just kind of dance your way through the record store and come out with a smile.
Okay. Well, any final words here for our Japanese audience, David, before we say sayonara?
Well, you got to be careful when you take the new Crazy from the Heat EP and you put it in with the rest of your collection, It says store in a cool, dry place, but we've found that anybody and anything within 20 feet of the album is far from cool or dry. And when you stick it in with the rest of your records, watch out that you don't embarrass them because their little holes in the middle will seal shut.
Thank you very much. This is the poor man reporting.
While you digest that piece of advice from David, turn over the cassette because we've got more coming your way.